Welcome to the Road to Accountable AI. I'm Kevin Werbach, professor of legal studies and business ethics at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. For decades, I've studied emerging technologies from broadband to blockchain. Today, artificial intelligence promises to transform our world. But AI won't reach its potential without accountability, mechanisms to ensure it's deployed in responsible, safe, and trustworthy ways. On this podcast, I speak with the experts leading the charge for accountable AI. Beth Noveck has served as the director of the White House Open Government Initiative under President Obama, senior advisor for open government for UK Prime Minister David Cameron, and a member of the Digital Council for German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Today, she has a dual role as a professor at Northeastern University and director of the Governance Lab, and the first Chief AI Strategist of the state of New Jersey. In our conversation, we focus on accountable AI deployment in the public sector. How can government agencies both realize the benefits and manage the risks of AI and related technologies? Beth, welcome to the Road to Accountable AI.
Kevin, thank you for having me.
You were fairly recently named the first Chief AI Strategist of the state of New Jersey.
Of any state.
Of any state. Okay, so tell us what that means.
Well, I have to say lots of states now and in the federal government are naming a Chief AI Officer or are following suit to have somebody who is responsible for AI governance, AI use, AI education in the state. And that very much is my role. So I've served for the last 6 years. I've had the pleasure to serve as the first Chief Innovation Officer for the state of New Jersey, which was centrally about how do we use new technology to advance the priority of serving residents of the state? How do we use it to deliver better technology, deliver better services for the people of New Jersey? And since the technology du jour, of course, is AI, and it is so transformational, we made the decision that we should have both a Chief Innovation Officer on the one hand and somebody who is thinking just about what are these new technologies, what do they mean, and how do they enhance our ability to serve residents, its businesses, its economy, create jobs, as well as help the state to do what it does for residents better and faster.
What are some of the things that you anticipate AI will be or maybe is already being used for public services?
So already being used for. So I think it's important to recognize, first of all, that AI has been around for quite some time and has already been in use in public and in the private sector. Of course, more recently, this new generation of generative AI tools that are so good at both creating content, but also analyzing content. And whether that is numbers and data as we traditionally think about it, or whether that's words or images, which are also just another form of data. What these tools, I think, are so transformational at doing is helping us to get smarter, faster in our institutions and do our work more efficiently, but also in ways that are more responsive to residents. And let me give you a few examples and explain what I mean by that. So first of all, very important for responsible use of AI is that the AI is really secondary. It is the tool. It is on tap, but not on top, to paraphrase Churchill here. That is to say, we're not looking to eliminate anybody's job. To the contrary, what we're looking to do is to put tools into the hands of public servants, public professionals, to help them do what they do as efficiently and effectively as possible. So, for example, when we are within the New Jersey Department of Labor sending out letters to claimants for unemployment insurance, we're now taking those letters, 70 of those templates, for example, that we use to correspond with citizens about the service the state delivers, a very important and needed service, using that to rewrite those letters in plain English. So that instead of sending out government speak, not that we did that before, but we can do better in terms of writing in really plain English, in terms of writing in ways it's easier for people to read. And in fact, with really just the click of a button, using these tools to rewrite how we're talking to people, we've decreased the time by 50% that it's taking people to read those letters. If in the state of New Jersey, you call in to ask a question about your anchor tax rebate that homeowners are entitled to, what we're doing is using the data from those calls, which we can now better listen to and summarize and analyze using generative AI, and using it to rapidly write phone tree responses so that we're putting front and center the information that residents actually want and need so they don't have to wait on hold to talk to an operator. And for those then who have a question that's not getting answered, they can, when they do talk to somebody, we're able to answer those questions more quickly. So that means 50% improvement now, practically overnight, in the responsiveness of those calls for residents, precisely because we're able to give people the information they want faster and easier, because it's easier for us to write that information. But that's just the beginning. But so let me just stop there. Some of the very first initial uses of things like generative AI, early days.
Absolutely. What are some of the similarities and differences of those kinds of use cases or other kinds of use cases in a government setting compared to, say, a company that's thinking about using generative AI in terms of how it communicates with its customers?
Well, on the one hand, many of the uses are the same across organizations. If it's writing a first draft of the CEO's speech or writing a first draft of, a minister's speech, if it is writing a first draft of a letter, we write letters and memos in all kinds of organizations. If the use is, for example, to analyze data or to make an image to illustrate a blog post, none of that's different. This is, really a next generation set of, I would say, both word processing tools and the calculator mushed together that are going to be helpful to anybody in every organization. What's different is the intent. In the public sector, we're starting with the focus on how do we best serve residents? How do we best serve the public? And how do we advance the public interest? So that intent, and I would like to think that both the private sector and the public sector, companies and governments, can and should have the public's interest at heart. So if you come to the equation saying, how can I cut the most costs? I'm going to end up potentially in a different place than if what I'm saying is, how can I deliver the best customer service? So I would like to think that the best companies are asking that latter question, not just the former question. If I'm coming to the equation with the question, how can I use these tools to make my workers more productive so that they can do more and do better? That's a far, I think, better attitude than how can I use AI to fire my workers and get rid of them? So it's the intent that you bring to it. In government, the public interest. And I think that goal of augmenting workers rather than replacing them is really core to the values that we bring to the equation. But that doesn't have to be limited to the public sector.
Does it change how you think about responsible or ethical AI?
It does, in the sense that I really think that government is a really, really important user of these tools. There's obviously a lot of concern given what we've seen from social media, and I would say the kind of degradation of the quality of social media, the proliferation of disinformation and misinformation that's given pause to a lot of us about private ownership of the platforms that are effectively our public square. It's where we're spending our time. It's where we're socializing with one another. It's where we're building community. And yet all those places are privately owned. And we've seen the consequences of that. If the CEO of the company, if the board of the company makes the decision that we're going to, for example, fire all the content moderators, or we're going to let hate speech proliferate on the platform, it really degrades quality. So I think that's given people a lot of pause as we now embrace this new set of tools. What does it mean that these powerful technologies we're going to use for creating content, for editing content, for education, for healthcare, for all these important uses are going to be in the hands of a couple of companies and a handful of private individuals? So I'm pretty excited about government as a creator and user of AI because of the role that it can play in really trying to both design and build and use products for public purpose.
What do you see in general as some of the most important challenges for AI governance or responsible AI, or I like to talk about accountable AI? Choose your phrase.
I, I'd
But
love
what
to
do you
hear
think is most important?
what do you think are the differences? Or I'm curious about, if I'm allowed to ask a question back, how do you think about the difference between responsible and accountable?
Absolutely. No, I use accountable to emphasize the connection between the activity and the implications and the response. That it's about ensuring that there's an information flow, and that leads into an understanding of the issues, and that leads into a set of obligations, which might be internal or they might be external, and people could put that under these other rubrics as well. But I think sometimes, when people hear ethics or even hear responsibility, they think it just means, oh, well, just, do the right thing, as opposed to having a sense of putting all the processes in place that it takes to do that effectively.
Yeah, I think we're all trying to figure out right now what is the right thing with technologies that are changing so very rapidly and what that looked like. But it obviously starts by having some guidance as people begin to use these tools. So the idea of having policies, even if they're interim policies that will change, having some guidelines for workers so that they can go out and try these tools. And that's the second piece of it. Responsible use, the emphasis also has to include use. And we're not going to understand what it means to be responsible unless we've actually tried these tools and understand what they're good at and where their limitations are. Very hard to know how to respond to and mitigate risk for something that I don't understand. And frankly, I have been in the room with regulators, people responsible for deciding what the fate of these technologies will be. And when I've asked, how often do you use Claude, ChatGPT, Google Gemini, etc., and no hands go up, it gives me great pause to think about making the people making the rules of the road not having the experience. It would be like trying to create the traffic laws if you've never driven a car. So we need to have some use. We need to have some experience. That means using these tools. And to be able to use them, we do have to have some guidelines about what is and what isn't safe as driven by those who have some experience. But the other piece of this is education. So use is part of that, and education and training, because it's not enough just to have a policy. That is to say, a piece of paper, a document. I need somebody to really show me. So in my case, I have a teenager at home who does that work of showing me what it is I should do with these tools and all the cool things that I can be accomplishing. And I think it's so important in organizations, whether private or public, to ensure that we have a robust program for training workers, upskilling people to use these new technologies so we can understand what does it mean for each of our jobs day to day. And that's going to look different depending on what our work is and what we do. But educating people about what those uses are, again, what the benefits are and the potential uses, what the risks are and how do we mitigate them, has to be both policy and practice. That's why in New Jersey, Governor Murphy has been very forthright about saying we're going to train all of our public sector professionals in the use of AI so that people can begin to understand how do we use these technologies for good. And finally, I will say that responsible use, as with any technology, has both a set of negative prescriptions, all the things we don't want to do. That is to say, don't put personally identifiable information into these tools. Don't type in anybody's social security and number, and don't type in your own. But it also has a set of positive prescriptions. And I think that's important, is to recognize that accountable, responsible, beneficial use is about asking and answering the question, how can we use these tools for good? Not just what do we not want to do, but what can we do that actually is going to lead to improvements in people's lives?
That's interesting. And it ties into your innovation role. How do you create an environment in government that overcomes the natural risk aversion? Because if something gets deployed and there's a problem, there's going to be criticisms. So how do you create an environment where people are willing to try those new technologies, use the AI for the benefits, address as much as possible the concerns, but not be too afraid?
So I think different institutions have gone about this differently. In the U.S. Congress, what they did was have a pilot group, a sort of cohort of a few hundred people who were given licenses to ChatGPT on the condition that they would report back about how they were using them and sit down and have a conversation and discuss what's working, what's not working. Again, what are the beneficial uses, what's not working well, et cetera, and educate one another. So they started with a pilot essentially and said, "We're not going to give it to everybody, but we're going to give it to a few people." And then actually what they did was take back those licenses and now give it out to a few hundred engineers who work for Congress to let them play with the tools, see what they can actually do with it. Other organizations with AI and other technologies have created what they call a sandbox. They create a secure environment, behind a firewall. They have the appropriate sort of licenses already procured. And they kind of create literally a sort of physically safe space in which you can try some of these tools. And again, with policies and guidance, et cetera. And again, what we've done in New Jersey is to put out this a policy, but we went beyond just having a piece of paper that says, be careful in how you use these tools. We laid out very specifically in the policy, and that's quite unique. It's a longer document because it says, here are examples of how you could be using these tools to serve residents. Here are things you should not be doing in terms of privacy, in terms of cybersecurity, in terms of personally identifiable information, and in terms of, again, safeguarding the public interest in how you do your work. We provided training video to go with it that illustrates the policy and actually shows you what we mean. Um, Not enough, again, to explain people use these tools responsibly if you've never even tried them before. And again, now we're rolling out government-wide training for everybody to help ensure that we have those protections in place. That goes again with other sorts of things like signing terms of use, procuring, the appropriate technologies so that to help people in making the decision about which tools should I be using that are actually safe, and lots of kind of guidance and advice about, again, how to use these tools and what to do with them as we encourage people to try and see what works.
What do you think is the biggest gap or the biggest concern with regard to problems that might occur with these kinds of deployments?
Well, you're absolutely right that there will be the things that there will inevitably be bumps in the road, as there have been with every kind of technology. And I want to double down on emphasizing that while AI and generative AI are a powerful set of data processing tools, there are things that they can do that no other technology before them has been able to do, and they are unique in their power and capability. They are also just another new technology. And we have encountered the same challenges before as we've embraced any kind of software or technology where we have had to, ensure that we mitigate the risks from hacking and cybersecurity, from, again, that we have processes in place to review the technologies and make sure. And now I'm going to get to the answer to your question that the first and foremost, we are defining the problem we're trying to solve and then designing the process and the technology that will lead to the solution to that problem. We've seen the floor littered with apps that do not solve anybody's problem, frankly. They just take up space in your phone and they don't do much good at all. But in other words, technology that's often not really well suited for purpose is badly designed, makes people's lives worse, in terms of having websites that are more complicated and harder to use. So floor is littered with bad design and bad tech. And as with these tools, as with any other, got to start with what's the problem we're trying to solve? And then let's figure out, is this the right tool for the purpose and how do we use it? But in the first place, again, if we start with what I would call low risk uses, that is to say, and I don't mean this in the European legal sense or any formal sort of term of art, but what I mean is if we're starting with largely internal uses rather than public facing ones, that's a pretty good way to start to figure out what is it that I can do with these things and avoid the missteps that we've seen so many of, the lawyer who files the brief, forgetting to remove the fact that says this was written by ChatGPT. or the person, again, who writes the paper that so obviously has the hallmarks of having been written by generative AI and never read by anybody. So those missteps, we will get better at if we practice on uses that are internal, as in writing the first draft of a memo that is going to be internal to my office, rather than using it on things that might be public facing in the first instance.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Um, you also have an academic role as a professor at Northeastern University. I'm curious how
You see me
your
arranging dueling bookcases here.
exactly how does your academic background as a law professor feed into the work that you do in New Jersey?
Oh, well, I think in a variety of ways. And so I'm very, very lucky to be able to wear these two hats. I mean, on the one hand, what it allows me to do is to have an excuse to keep up on the latest in research. And this is a field that's changing so fast. So being able to be aware of what are developments with these technologies, what are their capabilities? What are they doing, to be able to look around the world and say, not just what are we doing in New Jersey, but what's happening in other states, other countries? How are other kinds of institutions, just executive, but legislative and judicial, using these tools, and to bring some of that knowledge back and to bear in the work that we're doing. In my new role in particular, more so than before, I'm very excited that I will have more opportunity to be able to collaborate and work with universities. And so my background as a teacher and as a researcher is helpful here. God bless you. For exploring sort of ways in which we can get students involved in building technology and doing projects with governments, which is something I spend a lot of my time thinking about and doing, because I think generative one of the things that generative AI does in particular, by bringing down the cost and the time it takes to write software code, is making it easier and will make it easier for students and others who may not have years of experience to be involved in things like the development and delivery of digital services for companies and for nonprofits and for governments. That's going to be a great experience, for students, but it's also going to be very helpful for institutions. So on my professorial side of things, that's what I do, is I work with students on building generative AI projects for public institutions, which is a great experience all around. Students learn how to take something from idea to implementation in collaboration with the communities they're trying to serve, governments, nonprofits, and others who otherwise wouldn't have the ability to benefit from these technologies and don't necessarily have the personnel who currently work for them with this training get to benefit from students with the latest training in AI and computer science.
Who do you look to, or where do you look to, whether it's states, other governments, or companies, for models for effective implementation of AI?
Hmm. It's a great question. I'm completely biased, because I do love the work that our teams and that my colleagues in New Jersey are doing. After many years of having an innovation team and really doubling down on collaborating with our agency colleagues to build digital services and use new technology to serve residents, using not just technology, but a human centered design. That is to say, listening to and engaging with residents to be able to hear from them, what is it we should be building and how can we make it intuitive and easy for them, using data to help drive that decision making and design. I've been very inspired by some of the things that are getting built here, and I'm really always excited to evangelize about a lot of those examples. That said, um, I just came from a few minutes ago having had the pleasure of the tables being flipped, in that I was the interviewer and the interviewee was Minister Audrey Tang of Taiwan, who is the digital minister. And what she has been doing in Taiwan has just for years now to embrace the use of new technology. First and foremost, and most excitingly, to involve citizens in decision making processes. It's really exciting. So, her story by itself, she was not a government professional. She was an activist who actually participated in occupying the parliament, later became an advisor to a minister, and then became the minister herself, but came in from the outside with a knowledge of new technology, began to educate the government, not just in how to use technology, but more importantly, in how to collaborate with people outside of government, how to work with the civic community, how to work with the business community, how to work with others who are potentially more innovative and bring that technology into government. So as she explained a few minutes ago, Taiwan's, very successful contact tracing program during COVID was entirely built by people from outside of government that they then just adopted as the standard for what they did. The platform that still is known as Be Taiwan, where they used a variety of different online platforms to get citizens engaged in collaboratively drafting what turned into 26 pieces of legislation, was all developed by activists from outside, and then the government embraced the results of that. So I think Taiwan is very sort of forward leaning, and now they've been doing work to use AI enabled platforms to go out and ask citizens about their views on AI. And then the AI is very helpful, of course, in synthesizing and summarizing what they're hearing from people. I would say the other place is really Iceland. Iceland has been for a long time a leader in digital government, but also in that kind of community engaged approach with its project, Better Reykjavik, which over 20% of the population actively participates in proposing policy ideas to the city of Reykjavik, to the national government, which then gets acted upon. So they have just this, in both places, a much better oiled machinery for engaging citizens in government beyond election day. So those are the places that I've always looked to as models that I'm really excited about, that use a lot of free and open source software to do this. But every state in the United States and so many cities, every time you turn around, you'll find pockets of innovation that's happening.
There have, though, been scandals in various countries with the use of at least algorithmic decision-making systems, like the UK post office scandal, the Netherlands, and other places where governments have used data and algorithmic decision-making in ways that have been harmful or discriminatory. So what does it take to to ensure that that our governments to have that more openness that you're talking about in their deployment of these technologies?
Yeah, well, that is, there are some obviously truly frightening examples. The UK post office one, for those who don't know, I think it's now common knowledge here. But that was the case where the UK post office employed a technology system, and it was falsely accusing what we would call a deputy postmaster, I guess, in this country, sort of junior postal officials, of committing fraud. And a lot of people got caught up in this set of accusations. And then, of course, some of those people went to jail. One of them even committed suicide. And there was clear evidence that the technology system was just spitting out bad results, and it was completely wrong. And yet, and here's where the scandal comes in and why I wanted to explain this, in the end, it wasn't about the bad tech. It was about the fact that the leadership doubled down on, dug their heels in, and refused to listen, and doggedly pursued these persecuted people, and pursued these prosecutions, even in the face of facts that told them this was wrong. So everywhere we're going to have problems of people in power who do not want to relinquish their power. And yes, technology will be a helpmeet to those sets of practices. We know that there are both governments and companies who will want to use algorithmic decision making, whether it's to bring down the cost of hiring workers, which is, a very important task that companies especially need to engage in, or making the decision about who gets paroled or who gets prosecuted. There's going to be so much pressure to use these tools to realize efficiencies when we don't know what's going on under the hood. To use your word, there's no accountability for the technology. And the intent with which we approach these is going to be really important. This is why I think it's very path-breaking that in Europe they've said, look, when it comes to these kinds of systems that are making decisions that affect people's freedoms, that affect people's education, that affect people's life outcomes, we are going to scrutinize these things and regulate them really, really carefully. It's not the writing the first draft of your memo with ChatGPT that we're worried about. It's the sending people to prison with the machine learning algorithm that, or depriving people of insurance, or depriving someone of a mortgage or a college degree, because an AI made a bad decision because of biased training data, or, just a bad piece of software that doesn't do what it's supposed to do. So coming back to a lot of your risk scenarios you were asking about earlier, these are the contexts that we're really worried about and that we are going to need to regulate.
Absolutely. So on the more positive side, how do you measure success, or how should a government agency measure success when it's looking at something like an AI deployment?
Well, we always need to measure success based on the lives of the people we improve. Are we making somebody's life better as a result of this? That's got to be the question. And that should be the North Star in terms of how we think about the deployment of these technologies. So we want to know, for example, when the New Jersey Department of Labor deploys mycareernj.gov, its new career coaching and training explorer tool set. Is it helping workers to make a more informed decision about what training course they should take? That project uses machine learning very uniquely among government websites, not to provide one size fits all information, as most governments do, but to actually give you personalized recommendations about your job search, about careers that could be a good fit for your skill set, and about the training that you might want to take to prepare you for that next career. So it's using machine learning to match your skill set from your resume to in-demand job data to be able to provide those recommendations. Is that helping someone to get a job? Is it helping someone to take a course that will prepare them so that they don't lose their job to, an AI algorithm at some point? Is it making someone's life better when we do that? When we use ChatGPT to redraft a letter that we send to a claimant for unemployment insurance, is it helping you get that benefit faster so that you can pay your rent, so that you can eat, so that you can feed your family? That really has to be the metrics we have to use. Obviously, in the shorter term, we can ask questions like, did we decrease the time it took to open the letter? Or did we answer the phone better, faster? Did it take less time to read this website? Were people happier? Lots of things we can and we need to be measuring. And the good part is AI, because it's so fast at processing data, can actually, I hope, help us to do that kind of measurement, which has eluded us in government for a long time, to do that better and faster.
Last question. What can citizens or companies that are developing technology in this area do to help and promote governments taking these kinds of steps that you're talking about?
So I think, first of all, making those demands, the more pressure that's put on governments to say, you know, New Jersey's providing personalized career advice. Why isn't my government providing personalized career advice? I don't have to wait on the phone, to get this benefit. Why isn't my government doing that? So I think creating that demand is really, really important. Number one. Number two, coming back to this idea of the importance of collaboration and engagement, I do think that there's going to be a lot of receptivity now as governments, are hungry for talented people who understand something about these tools for collaboration. So there's been an effort at the federal level, for example, and in various states to bring people, into government who have different kinds of skill sets. And doing a stint in public service is, I can say from firsthand experience, is, It's been the most rewarding experience of my life, and I really recommend it to anybody. And there are many ways to serve, not just at the federal level or the state level, but for your town, for your community. There isn't a town out there now who wouldn't like some help, for example, making a chatbot, as they've done in Prospect Park, New Jersey, which is a tiny little town in New Jersey, but which has a very forward-leaning mayor at the time when he was appointed, the youngest mayor ever appointed. It won't surprise you, given his tech bent, who has worked with friends and collaborators to create a chatbot. So even in this tiny little town, a resident can get answers to their questions about the city services 24/7 without having to go to City Hall or wait online or go 9 to 5 during the workday. They can get better served. So I think there's lots of opportunities. They were approached by somebody who said, "Hey, we're here to help. What can we do?" And I think there's lots of opportunities like that. And I would just encourage people to get involved and bring their know-how to bear.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's always wonderful talking with you.
Kevin, thank you for having me and being so interested in what the public sector is doing. It is the largest employer in the United States, and the largest purchaser of technology in the country. So I think what it does is going to be important for all of us as citizens, but also across sectors. A government being a smarter consumer and user of technology, I think, will have follow-on effects for every business, for every sector, and every industry.
This has been The Road to Accountable AI. If you like what you're hearing, please give us a good review and check out my Substack for more insights on AI accountability. Thank you for listening.